bringing together voices in child and youth healthcare. This is CAFC Presents.
CAFC would like to thank the following member organizations for their generous support of our knowledge translation activities: the IWK Health Centre, the Children's Health Foundation of London, the McMaster Children's Hospital Foundation, the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario Research Institute, the Children's Hospital Foundation of Manitoba, the Montreal Children's Hospital Foundation, and the Holland Bloorview Children's Rehabilitation Hospital Foundation. We would also like to thank the following Keystone partners for their ongoing contributions that support all of CAFC's programs and activities.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of CAFC Presents. My name is Lisa Stromquist and I'm the Coordinator for Quality and Patient Safety at CAFC. Today's webinar is titled The F Words in Childhood Disability, a Call for Action, bringing parents, clinicians, and researchers together. So I'd like to also thank Dr. Gail Andrew from the Glenrose Rehab Hospital in Edmonton. And I'm just going to pass the mic over to Gail to talk a little bit about the Canadian Network of Child and Youth Rehabilitation.
Thanks, Lisa. The Canadian Network of Child and Youth Rehabilitation Centre is part of CAFC. And what we are is a national partnership of child and youth rehabilitation centres and services, including clinicians and decision makers across Canada. Centre mission is to improve and promote best practices in provision of rehab services for children and youth living with disabilities and their families to advance quality of life. One activity of Centre is to provide researchers with opportunities to have more direct translation of their research knowledge into clinical practices, and also on the flip side to have the clinicians help the researchers with develop and formulate new research questions and to be part of the research along the whole continuum, along with other partners of families, child and youth as well. And so a great example of the work of Centre is it's the production of webinars such as the one today specific to topics of rehabilitation. So I'm very excited to be part of this webinar, and I'm anxiously awaiting all the new information. I'll turn it over to Lisa to introduce our speakers.
Thank you. So I just wanted we first heard about the F words a few years ago at a CAFC conference and at the Centre Rehab Symposium, where Dr. Rosenbaum started sharing some of these concepts as part of other sessions. So we've really been anticipating this presentation focused on hearing how this approach and these ideas can be put into practice. So it's now my pleasure to introduce today's panel. So Dr. Peter Rosenbaum is a co-founder of CanChild and a professor of Pediatrics at McMaster University. Dr. Willem Gorter is the Director of CanChild Centre for Childhood Disability Research and professor in the Department of Pediatrics. Maria Cecina is from the University of Indianapolis, and she works at Grandview Children's Center as a physiotherapist and comes with over 20 years' experience working in pediatrics. Julie Brocklehurst is a writer, an advocate, and a mother to a little boy with cerebral palsy. She created her blog, Tiptoeing Through, as a place to share some of her thoughts and feelings about life, love, and the unexpected journey of raising a child with special needs. We also have Andrea Cross, a PhD candidate at CanChild and in the School of Rehabilitation Science at McMaster University. So you can read their full bios on the Knowledge Exchange Network. And now we're going to pass the podium over to our presenters.
Okay, we're on. I hope people can hear us. Thank you very much for being here. You will hear about the F words along the way, but you'll see that the subtitle and perhaps the more important part of this webinar is the call to action. We will try to convince you that the F words make sense and that people like them. And the question then becomes, how can we use the ideas and how can we promote these ideas so that they become part of the thinking of parents and clinicians and policymakers. So just to tell you very briefly, you've heard who we are. We'll go to the next slide, please. Is that you moving the slides, right? We have our slide mover here, okay. Nope. There we go. Okay, well, you're going to hear from all of us. We are the panel, and we hope that the varied perspectives that you'll get from a couple of researchers, a therapist, a parent, and a knowledge translation expert, Andrea, will be of interest to you. If we move on then, we asked you to tell us who you were ahead of time, and we know that there are people from a variety of backgrounds and disciplines. There are at least a few people who are here in the role of parent or family member. Many of us who are here are health professionals of one sort or another, or administrators, or involved organizationally in the field of childhood disability. I want to make a point that we will emphasize throughout the session, and that is that all of you, all of us, also have another role which is really important, and that is the role of knowledge broker. That is to say, people who presumably signed up because you had some interest in what the topic was, and we hope that in addition to your own interest in however you might apply this in your own professional or personal life, that you will also take on the role, if you like these ideas, that you will take on the role of sharing them with other people. We also have people from other countries, additional to Canada, and we welcome you, especially people who are up in what we think might be the middle of the night. Okay, if we move on then, we asked the question about how many people have heard of the ICF framework, and it seemed like the majority had, and that's great because, as you'll see, we have a very strong attachment to the ICF framework, and of course the F words, as you'll see, are grounded on them. If we go to the next slide, we asked how many people had heard about the F words, and again, is this the one? Oh, this is the one where we wanted you to answer very quickly, yes or no. So the poll is open. You'll see the little pink box, and just yes or no very quickly. And the early results from New Hampshire are coming in.
So I'm just going to leave it open for one more moment.
And if we were in a room together where we could have real-time interaction, we would ask you, those of you who say you've heard of it, to tell us how you've heard of it. There isn't really an opportunity to do that. But it's been fun to share these ideas and to see how they seem to be catching on and the ways in which they're catching on. And Julie will talk a little bit about that, and Maria as well, I presume, about how they heard about these ideas, because they weren't part of our original, the original development of these ideas. How are we doing?
So 69% of people who responded said yes, they have heard of the F words in childhood disability.
Excellent. Okay, so the good news is a lot of you know, and the good news also is that gives us a chance to share these ideas with people who haven't heard about them yet. If we go to the next slide, we have another question. Again, very quick, very brief, and that is, for those who have either seen or heard of the F words, are you using them, or have you seen them being used in practice? Have you seen the ICF being used in practice? Again, because there is, as you'll see, a very practical and applicable element to our thinking about these things. So please, again, where's the little survey?
Yeah, it's up and people are responding, so we'll just give them another few seconds.
Okay, it's not up on our screen. At least I don't see it, so that's why I asked.
Yeah.
Again, by the end of the talk, we hope that people will see the potential applicability of both the ICF framework and the F words, which are grafted onto it, in a whole variety of ways that you can tell us about as well.
So, Peter, would you like to hear the results?
Yes, drum roll, please.
Drum roll. So, yes, 27% say yes, they had heard of, have seen the F words in practice. 51% said yes, they'd seen the ICF framework in practice, and 43% said no to both.
Okay, that's again, that's a substantial proportion, and we hope that by the end of this talk or by next week, the answer will be 100% yes. Okay, if we move on then, what we want to do today is to take you on a bit of a journey, and as I said at the beginning, we're really wanting to share the knowledge translation component of this work, and this is work that Andrea will tell you much more about. And what this is about, and I'm talking to everybody in the call with respect to whether you're a researcher, whether you're a clinician, whether you're a parent, whether you're a policymaker. It's one thing for the researchers to develop an idea and publish a paper, but that doesn't mean the world is a better place. And what we've learned over many years, and we at CanChild have learned, but I think what the world in science and research is learning, is that sharing the ideas and making them accessible to people is a whole other element. There's a major research component to this, which we can talk about and we'll talk about, and there's the importance of making sure that this is a two-way street, that when we share ideas, we researchers share ideas, that the people with whom they're being shared give us feedback. Yes, this makes sense. No, this doesn't make sense. It's a fine idea, but we can't do it, and so on. So the challenge to every audience that I talk to, and young Willem talks to, is we want to hear back from you as well, and we will bring this up again at the end. So very briefly, I was asked to give a talk in the UK, and young Willem and I had been talking about some of these ideas, developed the talk, and when the talk was done, young Willem said, we ought to write this up as a paper. So we did, and the paper got accepted very quickly, surprisingly, got published in mid-2012, and that led us to realize that this was really the beginning of a journey, and there's a research program underway, which we'll tell you a little bit about. But again, the emphasis today is on knowledge translation. So if we move to the next slide, we had 3 learning objectives. One is to share with you something about the journey, because we hope it'll be helpful, both about the specifics of this journey and potentially about other things you might want to do. You will hear from a parent and a clinician about how these ideas came to them and how they are using them and sharing them. And we hope that with respect to bullet 3, that we can together discuss next steps and recommended strategies for bringing these ideas into practice. And I will emphasize again the knowledge broker component that you people represent, and the importance of us hearing from you about what makes sense and particularly what doesn't make sense. Okay, so we've given you the prelude. We're going to tell you about our journey. We're going to have a panel discussion to reflect, as I said, on how people are hearing about and using the F words, and then we'll get into the call for action and have lots of time for your questions and for a bringing together of what we have heard about today. So I will now turn it over to Jan Willem.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. So welcome, everyone, and always great to have an opportunity to talk about the F words. We just love talking about it. Just to be very clear, some may have other ideas, but when we talk about the F words, we talk about family, function, fitness, fun, friends, and future. And these words were basically themes that we, Peter and I, have seen coming up from our research. So although they make sense to everyday life, as you can see on the pictures provided by families to fill in what the words stand for or how they envision, for example, family life or fitness, fun, and friends, Peter and I, as some of you may know, have been around in the field of childhood disability research. And CanChild has a long tradition of over 25 years of research. And if we look at the themes that have been studied, are basically around family functioning and families' experiences of services. The focus on function, and now in ICF terminology, we call it the International Classification of Functioning terminology, we call it activities and participation. The focus on physical activity and fitness and health the notion of fun, trends, and future. So basically, if we move on to the next slide, we see that this was all framed within a universal framework developed by the WHO, the World Health Organization, and published in 2001. This was a huge move forward in our thinking and reflecting on how we look at people's functioning from a very biomedical and deficit-oriented model to a positive health model, not looking only at a person's functioning at different levels. So it could be at the body function and structure, it could be at the activity level of everyday life activities, or it could be at a participation in society. But also the notion of that we all have a context. There are contextual factors that make how we do in everyday life. And in the WHO ICF framework, it is identified the boxes as environmental factors, such as physical environment, but also social environment and attitudinal environment, as well as personal factor. Think of age, gender, and interests, and ethnicity, and so forth. I think the beauty of this framework is that all the boxes, as you may say, so in the framework are connected. And if you have a close look, the arrows go in two ways. So it's not a unidirectional thing. There's always interaction, and it may go in two ways. So if we put these two together, and if I may quote you, Peter, you always get 2 for 1 here. We have the ICF framework and we have the F words. So what we did what Peter did in his presentation and later on in our paper, we applied the ICF framework in practice into the ICF framework, as you can see here, just as a way to memorize it. And we hope it's also a fun way of using something that could be sort of very static and boring, like an ICF framework. What you also can see is that we felt initially that fitness would jive well with the body function and structure level, function in the activity level, and friendships in the participation box. Family factors in contextual factors, environmental factors, and fun in the personal factors. The 6th F word, future, doesn't fit in the ICF framework itself, as basically it is a cross-sectional picture of someone's functioning. And I think if we talk about children and children in development, the whole notion of time is extremely important. As one of our parent collaborators said, the future is now. So everything we talk about and think about and do today has an impact on the future.
So today we're not going to go into much more detail specifically on what the F words are, and it's nice to see that there's a variety of people that have heard of the F words and people that these ideas are new to. Whether you've heard the ideas or not, we do encourage you to look up the F words in Childhood Disability Knowledge Hub, which is hosted on the CanChild website. Right now this is a work in progress, and over the spring we're going to be significantly adding to the Knowledge Hub as a way to spread awareness and share information on the F words. And we'll also be evaluating it as a knowledge translation strategy of distributing information on the F words with families and service providers. So we'll be recruiting some families and service providers. So if you think this might be of interest to you, please contact myself, Andrea Cross, and my email is there on the slide for you. So we've been talking about this word knowledge translation, and there's a lot of different terminology and words that are used to describe a similar process. So depending on where you're located in the world, you may have heard of knowledge mobilization, knowledge exchange, knowledge transfer and exchange, knowledge implementation. So these words are all defined a little bit differently, but what's important is they really describe a similar process. And here at CanChild, we use the word knowledge translation. And we define knowledge translation as the creation, synthesis and dissemination of research evidence in a user-friendly and accessible way that is relevant and meaningful for youth, families, and healthcare providers. And what's important to note is that knowledge translation isn't just about moving research and practice, and we really see this as a two-way process, and it's a partnership between knowledge users, for instance, clinicians and families, and researchers to learn about new ideas and research and to make sense of issues, to make sure that the things that we're studying are meaningful to families and clinicians. This process can also be described as integrated knowledge translation, which is defined as the collaboration of researchers and knowledge users across all stages of the research process. And we've really taken an integrated knowledge translation approach for the FWORDS research program, as we have parents that are part of our research team, and they're working with us throughout every single stage of this research program development, starting with designing our research questions, planning the knowledge hub, collecting the data, further analyzing the data, and of course at the end, disseminating our findings. So to give you a little bit of background, and we'll be going into more detail of the stages of the FWORDS journey so far. As Peter and Jan-Willem mentioned, the paper was originally written in 2011 and was later published in 2012. This is really when the conference presentations began, and we'll be going into more detail about how many conference presentations we've done over the last few years. And as the conference presentations were both to a local, national, and international audience, the word about the FWORDS began to spread. And we started to see that the FWORDS were being spread through the internet and social media, and not just by ourselves here at CanChild, but by people external to the CanChild environment. It was then through the interest of some parents in the FWORDS ideas that we decided to further explore these ideas, and we formed an integrated team of parents and researchers in 2014. And our first project working together was to try and get this message out about the FWORDS to a wider audience. So together we designed a 3-minute awareness video, which we posted online and did a short evaluation on its effectiveness. This takes us to where we are now, and I guess we're in 2016 now, but 2015 was focused on developing the research program and getting ethics and coming up with our plans for the FWORDS Knowledge Hub. And now in 2016, we're going to be implementing it and evaluating it. And as you can see, the timeline does continue, and we don't really know where it's all going to take us, but our ultimate hope is just to continue to foster partnerships and work together as we move these efforts into practice. So since 2011, the efforts have truly taken flight. The primary article has been downloaded 6,395 times since September 2011. It's been presented over 50 times. The video has had over 2,000 views, and we've seen multiple Facebook posts, tweets, articles, in newsletters, and online blogs. To give you a little bit more description about the FWORDS paper, this is taken from Google Scholar Analytics, but we've seen that it's been cited 52 times, and just the distribution of the number of downloads over the last few years. So you can see that there has been some variability year to year, but the interest in the FWORDS ideas have continued. In January alone of 2016, we had over 200 downloads. Subsequently, the FWORDS paper was translated into Spanish, and we also published a paper on the knowledge mobilization journey of creating and disseminating the video. In terms of the presentations, there's been 30 local, 7 national, and 20 international presentations on the FWORDS. Most importantly, 16 presentations have been co-presented with a parent. And in the types of presentations, we've had 23 inviter speaker talks or lectures, 9 keynote addresses, 15 workshops and webinars, and our webinar today is not included in that list, and 2 conference oral presentations and 8 conference poster presentations. At the end of the month, we're going to be holding a 3-hour workshop at Grandview Children's Center as part of their interprofessional day, and with a focus on the FWORDS and interprofessional collaboration. In terms of the efforts video, this was a short project, and it was our first time working together as a research team. And so over 5 months, we developed the video. We posted on the CanChild website, and we also had to use active dissemination strategies in order to get the video out there. So we used social media outlets, we used our networks, emails, talked about it at conference presentations, and we evaluated the number of views for 2 months, which we saw over 700 people viewed the video at this time. We also asked people that were viewing the video to complete a survey, and 137 people completed this online feedback form just to get a preliminary look at what people were thinking about these efforts and if this was an effective KT strategy. 55% of the viewers had not previously heard, so we were reaching a new audience. 88% indicated that they would share the video. 93% of viewers were interested in learning more, and 98% extremely liked the ideas. So this showed us that there was interest in the ideas and we should keep pushing forward. In the fall of 2014, we submitted the efforts video into CIHR's Institute of Human Development and Child and Youth Health Talks video competition, where it received 1,850 views and 290 likes. In terms of social media, we've used some social media ourselves to try and distribute the efforts message, but most of the social media and the online articles have come from people external to the research team, and we've seen multiple Facebook posts, more specifically 8 online news articles and 5 blog posts, and I'll tell you a little bit more about those. So we've provided you with here, if you're interested, all the links to the online news articles. And some of these articles we just came across by doing a Google search of the efforts in childhood disabilities. So we weren't actually aware that they were out there, some of them. But one to highlight is the Holland Blue Review Blue magazine. And this was written by Diane Kay, who was a parent researcher on our team in 2013, on her perspectives and ideas about the efforts. And this is actually written in 2013 before we formed our team, and was one of the ways that we connected.
You might want to mention that she's in the UK.
She is she's in the UK. And then this is just another slide with some more articles that have been published. In terms of the online blogs, you'll see in the top left corner, tiptoeing through, that's Julie Brocklehurst's blog, and she's online with us today. And this is actually how we originally connected with Julie, is that we saw a blog that she wrote about the efforts, and she'll be telling a little bit more about that later. What's really interesting is that these blogs are written by healthcare practitioners, occupational therapists, physiotherapists, parents, health researchers, and from around the world. So we had a blog written in Nepal, in Australia, in Finland, and here in Canada. So what have we learned along this journey so far? Well, we've learned that knowledge translation, it really is a journey, and it takes both time and collaboration. And as you can see in the little comic here, it is hard work in the beginning, but once you get that momentum, it does get easier, and it gets very exciting. And from there on, we just kind of embrace all the opportunities that are presented with us, and so we never really know where this knowledge translation journey is going to take us, which is the exciting part. From a theoretical lens, and I won't go into too much detail about the theory, but the diffusion of innovation theory is the theory that's informing our work. And I just wanted to draw attention to 3 components of the diffusion of innovation framework that we found to be very valuable and applicable components to our KT journey. So first, as I said, knowledge translation does take time, so you must be both patient and persistent. In terms of the channels, you need multiple channels to disseminate your message and multiple people involved. So you may have presentations, publications, online webinars like today, in-person lectures, but also social media and different avenues to spread your message. And third is to really recognize the value of the social systems and our partnerships and what working together can do. So that will bring me into the next stage of our talk today, which is going to be our panel discussion and about engagement in research and practice. So today we brought together a clinician, a parent, and researchers to discuss the F-Words ideas and share their own perspectives, values, and experiences. We also hope that you will join into the conversation during the question and answer session, and so that we can have a discussion together. Today's panel have been asked to answer the following 3 questions, and we'll just go through in order throughout for the panel discussion. So the panel is first going to answer, what do the F-Words mean to them? How can they apply the F-Words in practice? And what are their hopes for the F-Words?
And we know you can all read, but I want to emphasize a few points. The F-Words for us really bring together, first of all, positive language, and I think young Willem made that point, and I will underscore it. This is a positive orientation to child and family development, because all of the F-Words emphasize things that we think are important, both for today and, as was pointed out, for the future. There's an emphasis on possibility, and one of the things that has bothered me for a very long time in our field is meeting families who've been told what their children can't and won't be able to do. And I think that's very arrogant of us who say things like that. I think it's often wrong. So the notion of possibility and the emphasis on the positive, to me, is very important. And the focus on functioning and achievement. So the ICF and the F-Words are a strengths-based approach to things, and that's what these ideas mean to me.
So I think we are in an exciting time. We called it our 21st century thinking in the paper, and I do want to emphasize that although we are trained, and I myself have been trained as a physiatrist in understanding diseases and illnesses, but if you think of developmental medicine, helping children growing up, becoming adults, and helping their families, I think we need to shift that traditional thinking. We need to expand our thinking. And so I think that's what the F-Words mean to me and reflect that whole paradigm shift. I think the other thing is that we are very excited, and I am very excited about the notion that although we initially started the thinking and the presentation and the article from a researcher perspective, because everything, all the themes are building on research. There's research behind it. But the beauty is that now we seem to find a common ground, researchers, service providers, and parents in the F-Words. And it provides a language and something we can talk about. And I think communication is key in everything we do. I also think that it could help to drive change of practice, and I'm really thinking of ideas around advocacy. So yes, healthcare is important and healthcare has a place, but if we think of making a difference in the lives of children and families, we can't keep it to healthcare. There is only so much you can do within the healthcare system. If you talk about real life issues, for example, participation in a sport club and having an opportunity to participate in physical activities, for example, soccer, that's where real life things happen. And by the way, through participation in physical activity, they may improve their fitness levels, they may keep their range of motion, and so forth. So that's what it means to me. And I now want to hand it over to you, Maria.
Thank you, everybody. Again, you can read kind of what I wrote, but I think the most important thing is it reminds us to really look at the whole child and the family, because they're an integral part of what's kind of going on and how we can use them. And to think outside the box. It's hard at times, I think, for clinicians, given all the other demands that are put on us, and sometimes this idea of F-Words and client-centered, family-centered approach is a little bit scary because it's quite complicated, and sometimes this time it seems a bit time-consuming. But it makes me real excited when I can find an idea or an activity that a child wants to work on, and it takes me outside of my normal kind of environment or clinical expertise or practice and puts me in an area where I get to think about how can they bike ride, how can they participate, how can they do this outside of the clinic, and that makes me really exciting, and the F-Words helps us kind of focus on that. Julie, your turn.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Julie Brocklehurst, and I'm a parent of a child with a disability. My son, Brennan, is 11 years old, and he has cerebral palsy. First, I'd just really like to say that I'm thrilled to represent the parent perspective on the F-Words research team. I believe that parents and family members can offer a unique perspective because we're the ones living with a child with a disability. And I think parents really are the experts on our children, so it's crucial that family voices are heard. And again, you can read my slide there, but for parents, I believe that the F-Words represent a family-centered approach to child development, where program planning considers important aspects of a child's life outside of the standard therapeutic goals. And like Maria just said, I like that the F-Words puts more emphasis on the whole child and concepts that wouldn't typically be considered when developing a therapeutic program. They're now included. And again, like it's kind of already been mentioned, the 6 F-Words shed light on aspects of a child that are potentially being neglected, like fun and friends. And really, similar to the ICF framework, no one factor is more important than another. So, for example, sometimes having fun is just as important a reason for doing things as function. It's very important.
Excellent. So you've now heard from the researchers and clinician and parents about why they like and what the efforts mean to them. And so we're now going to transition the conversation into how we can really apply the efforts in practice. And you'll see on the slide here a picture of the Ron Joyce Children's Health Centre here in Hamilton, Ontario. This is a new centre that was just opened in the fall, and their new accessible playground. And we were speaking with a physiotherapist at the centre earlier this week, and they've posted an F-Words goal sheet beside the rock climbing wall and beside the playground. And what she's doing is she's encouraging her colleagues, whether it's other physiotherapists, occupational therapists, or whoever she's working with, to write down their goals and to start thinking about the F-Words and how these different environments, such as a playground, can really be used in therapy as well. So that's just one example, and I'll pass it on to Jan Willem.
Yeah, so I think that's building on you, Andrea's example is I think where some of the application and the opportunities are, because the framework is quite static and the words are just words. We have to bring them alive, but we can do that, and we just want to give you a few examples what we have learned from clinicians and other people, parents and others, how they have taken it to the next step. And there is no right and wrong here. It's I think just trying out how that could work. So let me give you an example of a physical therapist that I have been working with, who saw that scootering might be a very functional way of helping a child to become active. And so she sort of started studying into different aspects of that approach. And of course, there is a way of capturing muscle activity in a motion lab setting. You can do, and this is on the slide, you can look at different aspects of the body, how the joints move and the muscles function and so forth. But the F-Words also allowed to think how scootering may have an impact and how it could relate to family, again, outside of the clinical setting, to have fun with friends, and how it could help to build the future. So she framed her findings and thinking into this poster, Scootering for Children and Youth is More Than Fun, an appealing approach to improve function and fitness. You see, again, the sort of backward thinking, if you may say so. You start with a fun part. You start with the interest of the child is and what they are engaged in, and then to see what impact it can have in other aspects.
So this is, it's Maria speaking. So how I put the F words into practice, it came out of a, I guess, dilemma I was having in that my families didn't seem to be able or figure out a way to follow through on the exercise programs that I had prescribed or that I recommended. And so going back, and I read an article that reminded me that, again, collaborative goal setting, client-centered, family-centered approach should achieve a buy-in from the family and the child to be more willing to participate in those home exercise programs. So I had a physio student from Queens last year, and my idea was I didn't know what the families wanted, oddly enough. I was still pretty silo physio focused on what the goals were. And so I figured I needed to come up with a way to ask them what they wanted to work on. So her task was to take the F words and create what I call an ICF family goal worksheet so that they could write down goals in potentially all areas. So it's very much in its infancy stage. The original idea was to have it be interdisciplinary, but that didn't quite work out. And so at this point, it's very physio focused in its design, and it's going to hopefully evolve over time. But I've been kind of using this only since the spring of this year, and I tend to be using it when I kind of come to an impasse, and it seems like when the kids are hitting around 10 or 11, we seem to, they know how to stretch or they have some things to do, but we're kind of stalling on what next might be important. So I've used it kind of as a fact-finding mission, and it's been rather interesting, the sort of things that the kids come up, and it's not always me that they really want to focus on, and I think that one of the most interesting things that has come up is under the family section, or let me backtrack and say what I usually end up doing at 10 or 11 is I'll give one sheet to mom and dad, and I'll give one sheet to the client and ask them if they have a brother or a sister or a friend that can help them fill out theirs so that I can get the two perspectives, one from the child and one from the parents. The kids are very funny. Under the family section, what I've noticed the most is one of the goals that they're writing down is they want to stop arguing with mom and dad. And I think that's kind of ironic because that's at that particular stage, I think in development, it's very typical and normal that they will start to argue because they're trying to exercise some independence, yet everyone's kind of feeling like this is a problem that they need to work on. And it may not be my area, but again, it's typical development, and just to remind them that you're not the only family who's arguing with their 10 and 11-year-old over doing things they're supposed to do. So that's just been kind of interesting how it's kind of come out. As so far we haven't really put it into practice yet. I've just kind of been playing around with it, and I originally contacted the CanChild people to see if they had a better one already done up so I wouldn't have to create any more of a wheel, but this is where we've started so far.
And this is Julie again, and I'm just going to speak on behalf of Diane Kay, who is another parent on our research team. Diane developed an F-words agreement for her son Alfie, who also has CP. She wanted a way to put the F-words philosophy into action when negotiating with service providers, so she actually had a laminated printout of her son's agreement. She had it completed, and he owned it. He would show it at his clinic visits or at appointments as basically a starting point for discussion. And Diane had said that to her, it represented an informal but a serious pact between her child and whoever they relied on for support. So if you just look at the agreement there, you can see that the F-words agreement focuses on the child's strengths rather than on their challenges. And I really share Diane's thoughts in that I hope other parents will create an F-words agreement with their child. And it's something that could evolve with the child's development or as their interests change. I think I'm correct in saying that the agreement is available on the CanChild website, so that can be downloaded and personalized to each individual child or family. And I think that's a fantastic way to kind of break the ice and let others know your thoughts on what's important to you and your child. And as Maria just talked about, I'd also love to see something similar to that goal worksheet that she created, where you have the 6 categories or the 6 F words, and you would list goals that are important to you and your family in each area. That might be something that's a little less formal than an agreement or a contract, but it still puts to the forefront the things that are important to your family. And I think there was also an example of an article written about a parent who attached the 6 F words to their child's wheelchair, basically as a reminder to medical and healthcare staff to focus on the child and the family as a whole. And I think that's so important and just a wonderful example of how to use the F words.
Great. And just another example, on the left-hand side is a picture of a poster that is up in a clinic in the Alberta Children's Hospital. And so someone in this clinic has just printed off the F words in the ICF framework, and they've posted in the clinic in the waiting room as just a way to spread awareness and as a reminder to be focusing on these things. And maybe when they go and see the provider, they start a discussion on the F words. And so we've created an F words poster that we would like to share. And so we will be distributing this poster and also putting it on our CanChild Knowledge Hub, that it will be downloadable and that you can print it off and put it in your offices and your clinics and your homes, and just as a way to begin this conversation and to start thinking and applying the F words. And our final question for the panel today are, what are your hopes for the F words?
Okay, go ahead. Well, as I say at the beginning, we can't order people to do this, but what has been happening and what I particularly hope will continue to happen is people who these ideas interesting will pick them up, use them. And we've been talking for a while about the particular opportunities and roles of parents to use these ideas the way that Diane Kay did with the F words experiment, the way that Julie was talking about, because if parents pick up these ideas and to us, we may be enlightened and informed. And in this respect, parents, knowledge brokers, and become a potential change. Now, I don't want to suggest for a minute that parents don't have enough to do, so they also have to bring the health professionals along. But if the ideas that we're talking about are interesting and useful both to parents and to practitioners, then the potential for these to become part of the discourse of everyday life will be bigger. That's my hope.
So I think this exciting times, right? I would love to see that we now the words are out there, and we have heard of the spread, and we are very excited that we couldn't envision initially when we published it that it would spread beyond the typical sort of research and citation and so forth. I think with the social media, and especially through clinicians and parents uptake, I think it can become central in the world of therapy and intervention. At least that's my hope. The other thing, what I hope is, and we heard a few examples earlier today, is that I think it facilitated communication, and I think that's essential. We always realize that most of the conditions that the children have don't go away. That's a reality. Cerebral palsy, for example, we don't have a cure as of yet to take the cerebral palsy away, just to give an example. But so automatically, this is something for life, and you want to work together in a very positive, productive relationship. So I have been thinking that the efforts, and that's my hope, that it will lead to what I call relationship-centered care. It's not about the family, it's not about the professionals, it's really about how we work together and what is happening in between. So I want to emphasize the relationship. And I think that will, if we are aware of that, with everything we say, we think, and interact with each other, it will lead to better experiences. And with that, it will transform lives. That's my hope.
So from the clinician perspective, using the F words is, I think once the information gets out there, which I think it's still kind of coming, or if however we want to approach the knowledge translation, it definitely will create a better working relationship. And from a clinician point of view, why would you want to do this? I think if we're all talking about the same thing, or we have the same vision or path for where a particular client is going to go, it's going to make it much more efficient. And right now I'm all thinking about efficiency, because in the current kind of model that we're working under with healthcare and funding restraints, the trying to do more with less makes it really difficult if we're not on that same page. This gives us a way to share some of that responsibility with the family a little bit differently, other care providers, and really coming together rather than just me as the physio working on a single goal. Pulling in that interdisciplinary team so that everyone knows that maybe bike riding is part of the activity, but speech could be working on it, social work could be working on it, OTs can be working on it. Everyone can kind of be working a little bit in our own discipline, but also with this bigger goal vision in mind that's going to be a better future for our clients. Julie, off to you.
Thank you. So my hope as a parent, really my hope is that other parents will also feel empowered to talk with their child's doctors and therapists and feel comfortable stating the importance of the F-words concepts in their child's and in their family's life. And I would also hope that clinicians see the value in the F-words concepts and incorporate them into their own practice. So already it is so encouraging to know that researchers and health professionals are acknowledging the importance of these F-words concepts and are really working on promoting development through child and family strengths. And to me, that's just so exciting. I really believe in a family-centered approach to child development, and I would like to see these concepts incorporated into every aspect of clinical service, research, and advocacy for all children with disabilities.
Thank you. I just would add one comment that in talking to parents in clinic about these ideas, parents do seem to understand them and be receptive to them, even parents of young kids. And I think one of the things we still need to study is when can these ideas not only be introduced, but when do they start to make sense to parents? And in the very early part of their journey, they may still be wanting lots of therapy to fix things, and that's okay. I'm not critical of that. But I think if we start introducing these ideas very early, we have the potential to open people's minds to the importance of therapy to achieve goals like fun and fitness and function. So the call for action, which is now where you folks come in, we'd like you all, as I said at the beginning, to be knowledge brokers. If you like these ideas, use them, share them. If you're a parent, talk to your parents, your children's grandparents about these ideas. Talk with your neighbors. Talk certainly with your health professionals, because these are ideas that are free, and they are not something that we are going to take credit for, and certainly we get no money out of this. And I meant to say that at the beginning. In promoting these ideas, we are not selling anything except concepts, but we get no money for them. We get no money for the 6,395 downloads from the journal. But if the ideas make sense, then we hope people will use them. And similarly, as Maria said, that the service providers have an opportunity, I think, to open up the discussion with families, not to throw out everything we've been saying until now, but perhaps to frame it. And I think young Willem said that really well at the beginning. Therapy, is being done for goals. But when what are you going to do when you can walk better? And if we ask questions like that, so we're working on gait or we're working on hand function, what do we hope the child will be able to do when they can do it better than they can now? Can we help parents to see their children differently because their children are now more capable or their children are doing things better? And so I like to ask parents always in clinic, what do you want to brag about? And this is a question that about 95% of parents smile and beam and brag, and about 5% think I'm a fruitcake because nobody's ever asked them that. But again, as I said earlier, if the F-Words ideas and if the ICF framework are putting an emphasis on the positive, then these are really important ways to get people to think about them. And then with respect to researchers, I have started to say that we've got to not only think outside the box, we've either got to get rid of the box or make it bigger. Because these ideas are outside of the traditional box, and that's because the box has been so small and so confining. So where are we going? Discussion. Okay, so this is just a bunch of pictures, this is a bunch of pictures from families and friends about kids with impairments doing stuff, as you can see. And we're going on to tell you that you can get in touch with us in far more ways than I know how to do, through Facebook and Twitter and whatever those other things are. I don't do any of them except email. But there are lots of ways to follow us and find us and like us and friend us and whatever it is you do when you're doing all of these things. And so now we're going to open it up to the discussion questions. And we really are, because your comments can be anonymous, don't be shy. First of all, we'd like to know if there's anything you don't agree with respect to the F-Words ideas, because we will learn more from people being analytically critical than we will from people telling us this is wonderful. So don't be shy about that. We'd like to know if you like the F-Words, what kinds of ideas do you find appealing about them? And what things might we emphasize in our continuing efforts to promote these ideas? The third comes back to the knowledge broker idea. What can you do to share and promote these ideas? And then finally, what would you like us to do? And I will add one thing with respect to the sharing, and that is that we know, at least I know from personal experience and probably others as well, that these are ideas that appeal to policymakers. So these are not just ideas for a bunch of folks to sit around and talk about together. These ideas make a lot of sense to policymakers, and we can potentially try to influence how the people making decisions about services, and the points that Maria made earlier, that they can also learn these ideas and find them useful, because they are not, again, critical of what else we've been doing that's all wrong. They are simply a way of thinking differently about what we're doing, what we want to do, and how we can do it. So over to you, and will we hand back to our host?
Sure, thanks very much. This is wonderful. I do want to remind everybody you can write questions, or you can write answers to these particular questions that have been posed to you into your question pane in the control panel on your screen. I have a question here from Krista, and she's saying, I'm wondering where you see this headed in terms of developing validated measures, clinical and research measures, that would be meaningful for children and their family and caregivers.
I'll start. This is Peter. There are lots of measures already. There are, and in fact, an increasing number of very good measures looking at participation. So to the extent that participation is a relatively new idea, people are embracing this. There's a lot of very good literature on it. And there are tools, including the PEMCY, which is the Participation and Environment Measure for Children and Youth, and a young children's version of it, which is the same letters backwards. And that information is available on the CanChild website. And those are examples of measures that are looking at what kids do and what they want to do. There is, and I'll brag a bit about a very good measure of family-centered service that we developed 25 years ago that looks at parents' experience of services, the extent to which what we're doing is family-centered in various ways, and that's a measure that's used in many parts of the world. Lots of measures of activity that look at what kids do with their hands, for example, or how they do things with their mobility, or how their language is developing. We have, of course, traditionally had particularly large numbers of measures of body structure and function, range of motion, and measures of spasticity and things like that. And those are useful, but we need to know whether, if we're changing, for example, if we're changing spasticity, is that having an impact on function and activity? Is it having an impact on participation? And that goes back to a point Jan Willem made right at the beginning about how all these pieces are connected to one another. So there are a lot of tools already, and I can tell you in my last sentence that developing new tools takes a long time. So if we have good ones that we can use, don't try this at home.
Willem, here, if I may add, I think in addition to measures of the person's functioning, I think that we identified a gap looking at the boxes at the bottom of the ICF framework, the so-called contextual factors, including environmental factors and personal factors. I think the literature is going, well, at least has identified the gap. Now we need to do something about it. Maybe, as Peter said, measures development may take a long time, but what we can do is to listen to children and to youth and to families. We can do qualitative research, so we can listen in a systematic way, but also in a clinical setting, we can make explicit that we want to hear the voices of the children, the youth, and the families. There was a very good initiative that was presented last year at the American Academy, Just Say Hi initiative. It has a hashtag, I believe, Just Say Hi, because it speaks to the environment, the importance of environment where if someone may be nonverbal, people shy away of just saying hi to someone because they are afraid or other reasons. And it speaks, for me, to the attitudinal factors, what people think out there in society of people with a disability, and the interaction between the person and an environment.
Great. I have a number of questions coming in now, a number of comments. So Ashley is asking, can you tell us a little bit more about the workshop you're doing with Grandview and how we could access something like that for our center?
So this is a new initiative with Grandview, and we're just in the planning phases. So if you're interested in something like that for your center, the best way to find out more information is to contact us. And so my email was on the screen.
Sure, I can.
Yeah, and and you can see it, I think, on the homepage when you signed up. So yeah, just contact us here at CanChild. The thing to say about that is Grandview contacted us, and Maria is here from Grandview, but they were the ones that initiated it, and they contacted us, and we're now working together to put together this workshop. So if you're interested, that's excellent. Just send us an email.
And I have another a comment here from Patricia saying that another F word is freedom or independence. So.
Yep. We have been collecting F words ever since. And yeah, again, you may want to frame this whole set of ideas within the ICF framework and the picture we have by perhaps putting the word freedom in a banner across the top of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
You can play with this. You can develop these ideas in any way, but I think that's an excellent comment.
Mm-hmm. So Althea is saying, I think it's important to remember when thinking of fitness that the concept of mental health fitness is also thought about because of the emphasis is often placed on physical activity without thinking as much about the other aspects of what fitness means.
Yeah, Willem here, I think that's a wonderful comment. I think well, we know for sure that the literature or the research and maybe also our clinical thinking has been halted by two concrete siloed thinking, so physical versus mental, different systems, so healthcare versus education system versus community. So any way that would help us to bring that together and overcome those silos, I think that would be another hope, I think, within the efforts framework that it would facilitate that.
All right. And do you see this model for all stages of development up to older adult? And if so, how could we change or modify, open up the friendship box maybe?
Jan Willem here, and open up for others to respond as well. I was presenting on ideas or building on the effort ideas in Finland last year, where it was a mixed audience of adult healthcare providers and pediatric healthcare providers. And it jived really well, the ideas with adult healthcare providers. People working with chronic neurological conditions, multiple sclerosis, stroke, spinal cord injury. And so, yes, I think, thank you for bringing up that idea. I think we need maybe an Edwards paper for across the lifespan.
I would just add a comment that I was at a meeting several years ago in London where we talked mostly about childhood disability, and at one point there was part of the session was on adults with childhood onset conditions like CP and so on, and a comment from the audience was the idea that we needed more pediatricians for adults, and I thought it was a very witty comment. But what it illustrated, of course, is the fact that those of us who work with children and youth work in a family context to a greater or lesser extent, whereas adults with impairments can be independent and often are treated as independent beings, and there's less compulsion to be family-centered. So these ideas clearly are not age-specific. They reflect a way of thinking that we would like to see everybody engaging in.
Great. So another comment. So I'm pleased to hear that the policymakers are interested in the F words. The current frustration is that the funding to support these concepts is still focused on the medical model. Do you know of any initiatives currently rolling out, particularly in Ontario?
Offhand, no. And I can tell you that rolling out new models is incredibly difficult, even for the most willing policy people. But what we can hope, at least, and what I think is happening behind the scenes in Ontario is that the deputy ministers of health, education, children and youth services, and Ministry of MCSS, social services, actually meet together and chat. And I had the opportunity 2 or 3 years ago, through a very good colleague of ours in the Ministry of Children and Youth Services, to be able to sit and have coffee with them for about 40 minutes. And our colleague had pre-circulated the F words paper. And so part of what I said earlier was based upon their total understanding and excitement about these ideas. How that translates into policy, I think, is a complicated question about which I have very little insight. But I'm only saying that I think people recognize the limitations of the medical model. I think even some of our medical colleagues are starting to recognize that. But changing it is difficult.
So I have a comment from Joyce. She says, in Halton Region, children's developmental services and inclusion services are developing a family plan based on the F words and incorporating the 4 pillars from How Does Learning Happen? So she's looking for any ideas or suggestions.
She needs to get in touch with us and come in and show us what she's doing so we can learn, and then we can talk together over coffee or even over a beer. Means of communicating.
All right. Just a comment that this also fits well around the idea of capacity building that's discussed within much of the transition literature. And as Peter talked about thinking outside the box, I think that this way opens up the boxes that we as clinicians put ourselves in or are expected to be in. It brings freedom and opens up relationships. So That's a pretty positive comment. I think we have someone.
Maybe young Willem should say a word or two about capacity, because he's very interested and very actively engaged in issues of transition process and the adult lives of people who used to be children.
Yeah, and if I may link it back to the F words, I would link it to the word future.
Yeah.
The whole notion of future, I think in our biomedical thinking, we tend to be very short-term focused because we want to deal or, well, first of all, we respond to a problem or a current issue. But it comes really to light when children leave the pediatric setting and enter an adult healthcare setting where people may not know about what it is to grow up and live with a disability all your life, because that's your normal, right? That's one thing. The other thing is that we are all busy, and maybe I can ask Julie to speak to it as a parent. Is that it's sometimes we forget to think about the future, so I in terms of transition, I break it down in my ABC scheme of A is the awareness. The whole notion talking about the future is extremely important, and we often forget that in our clinical interactions. While everything you do should be placed in that context, but also talking about the future gives everyone a future, because you start seeing that the child will grow up. We know basically over 90% of the children with child-onset conditions will survive into adulthood. And I know from the literature around children with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, they have found it extremely harmful, I think, and painful that initially there was not that future for them because of the realities at that time, and that hindered them in their development, thinking about going into high school, but if also leaving high school, could you live on your own? So awareness is extremely important, and then all the services and supports will follow. The second is the B of building capacity. It was mentioned earlier. I think we have opportunities, and we have to create opportunities to together build capacity, not only with the person but also with the parents. So it's really the almost the triangle: parents, youth, and families that. Parents, youth, and healthcare providers working together and building capacity together. And the C is for collaboration and making connections, because nobody can do this on their own. It's a journey, and you have to partner with many people involved in the lives. It takes a village to raise a child, right, is the expression, but it truly is. And I think that's why we now have to build capacity in the adult healthcare setting, because we know from many families that they miss out on those opportunities. Julie, do you want to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've really, hit on something there with regards to the future. And I know as a parent myself, when my son was young, I found it really difficult to look too far ahead and look too far into the future. That kind of changes over time. He's 11 now, but I know early on we were kind of really just taking it day by day and one day at a time. But I think as parents, we certainly know our children better than anyone, and we know what works best for our family. So I would really like parents to know that when you direct your therapy planning around these F-words concepts to fit with your family and your child, you're really doing what the evidence tells us works best. Parents of children with disabilities are just like other parents. We want what all parents want for their children. We want them to be happy, and we want them to have fun, to have friends, to be able to participate in so-called normal activities. We want them to be involved and included, and to be respected, probably most of all. So really, instead of focusing on what the child can't do, professionals really should be looking at the whole child and their strengths, and able to develop their skills and work together with the family to see how that looks and how that's going to work.
Thanks very much. Gail, did you have any responses or any thoughts about these questions or anything that's been said?
Oh, thanks, Lisa. I've actually been listening with 3 different hats on, and I want to respond to question number 3, what can you do to share and promote these ideas? I think first, responsibility. As the chairman of the Research and Knowledge Translation Committee of CINSER, I call on all of our CINSER members to actually begin to use this language in all of our work, whether it's clinical service delivery or at the research level, engaging with researchers and translating research. I think that common language is so important. And really the F words aligns with our mission statement, which I briefly mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. I'll put on my clinical hat. I'm a developmental pediatrician, and I work across many disability groups. And I really see this, that I have a responsibility to bring the F words concept into my day-to-day contact with children, families, in my helping work with them to set their goals, and then actually then taking those goals into how we're going to translate it, actual service, making a difference in their community settings, whether it's a school program, participation in the local park, whatever. So I think clinically I need to do a better job. And then I'm going to put on my other hat. Here in Alberta, I do have the opportunity to provide some consultation to the Alberta Government Cross Ministries Committee on Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder, which is my area of personal interest and research. So begin to use this positive work, this language, when we're dealing with decision-making. I think, again, it's really positive to shift, get them to do that paradigm shift. And I go back to one of the other F words. I'm not sure what number of F we're up to now, but funding. I think we need funding to do a lot of the things that we're talking about. And when we have an opportunity to talk to policymakers and funders and again put it in this framework, when they have to allocate resources, because we know we're not necessarily going to get new resources, but if the allocated resources are in the areas to support what the F word is really developing in terms of the framework, I think the money will go a longer way and for more important positive outcomes for not just the child, youth, and young adult and family, but also it should be more positive for the system. So that's how I see I've got a lot of work ahead of me.
Thank you.
Right, I have a comment from Daniela. She says, for parents, talking about the future is scary. And who should initiate this subject? Should it be the doctor or should it be the parent?
Lee?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, like I just kind of mentioned, it is scary. It's scary for me still as a parent. And I don't know who should initiate. It's a tough one, but I think certainly bring up any concerns that you might have, any worries, any fears. Just start the conversation, I think, with whoever you think might be able to help you out with, what your plans are for the future or your goals or your hopes.
Right. If I may build on that, Julie, Willem here is from my transition work and also from our recent study on transition. And this is beyond disabilities. This was a study with a range of chronic health conditions. So, for example, young people with diabetes managed well in high school still had similar issues. And one of the things is that after they transitioned out of the pediatric healthcare, they lived the experience of missing out on some of understanding what was needed to stay healthy, to have that capacity basically to manage their own healthcare. And they literally said to us, I had hoped that someone would have told me that is aware of this. It starts with that awareness, and I think healthcare professionals do have a responsibility here because it is in the literature. We should be trained in that. That there are things down the road that may come up, and I would emphasize not to scare people off, but to frame it in a realistic and a positive way. that there is a future, but there may be challenges down the road, and we can help build youth for that future.
Peter, I would add to that in reflecting on this really good question, and it's a somewhat uncomfortable question, I think that developmental pediatricians and probably therapists and others should be talking about a life course view. That doesn't mean quite to talk about what do you think is going to happen when they're 18, although that's implicit in the question. But if we start with the idea that Willem mentioned, that the kids we're talking about with chronic conditions are going to grow up to be adults with those chronic conditions, then part of what we have to keep our eye on is what does what we're doing today, this week, this month, mean for next year? How is this going to be impactful on children's long-term development? So in addition to the concern about the current problem and potentially addressing the current problem, if we think about long-term, about development, one of my favorite words, then we are implicitly, if not explicitly, talking about the future. And then we're talking about emphasizing capacity and capability and self-confidence and sense of self, whether you walk nicely or talk nicely or use your hands nicely or whatever.
Maria here, can I just jump in for a second?
Please.
When we're talking about the future, I know we're talking today with families who have children with disability, but any parent, when you talk about the future of their child, it's a scary concept, whether they have a disability or not. It's like, what does that look like? And trying to set them up to be independent. I think it's kind of a universal fear for parents. And happily, I get to work in a interdisciplinary setting where when those sorts of things are beyond my scope of practice, I encourage social workers to come involved, or again, I'm seeing a lot of kind of sheltering of some of the kids, and some of the 10-year-olds, especially some of the girls I'm working with, are pressing the issue. They want to be independent. They want, their goals around family on the goal sheets were, I want to learn how to cook. I want to go out and spend more time with my friends. I want to walk to school with my friends without my mom following me. I mean, some of them are pushing their parents, just like typical kids push their parents to exercise some of that independence, and it's learning to let go for any parent that's really difficult.
And the challenge for kids with developmental challenges of one sort or another is that they can't necessarily take the initiative. Most kids don't ask for permission. They do it, and maybe they get into difficulty, and maybe they learn something from that. But if a kid has a mobility restriction, for example, or if a child is visually impaired, it may be much harder for them to take those risks. And so we have to help parents help their kids get into mischief and learn about these ideas, these concepts anyway, so that they can enable their children to take risks and, feel their oats.
And there was another example I recently had of a cerebral palsy child, level 5, so dependent in his power wheelchair, who was getting in trouble at school and therefore causing stress at home because he was arguing or raising his voice with his friends. Now he's in about grade 3, grade 4, and I'm just thinking in the back of my head, this is typical behavior. Any other kid would have already been sent to the principal's office by now, and he's finally just now exercising his voice to say he's not happy with the situation, yet everyone else around him was seeing this was a problem. I mean, this is great. This is good development. So educating everyone along the team, even some of the educators as to how to foster the independence, how to look at, reframe it in a different way, because as fun and doing stuff and participation, it may look different from everybody else, but they're trying to do some of the same things.
As long as he wasn't using the original F word.
Exactly.
All right. We have a couple more comments, but I think they're along the same vein as what you've just been discussing. So Judith says, helping parents to realize their child's strengths is something that we've always tried to do as OTs, but this concept may help parents to think about possibilities earlier. It is a natural thing to think about what has been lost or can't be achieved. And I think it's hard for parents initially. We as a team have to start gently encouraging focus on achievements that can be realized.
Bagging.
And I don't know, I'll just see if we have any more questions coming in.
Lisa,
go ahead.
So I was just sort of pondering a bit on the notion of who should initiate a discussion about the future. And one thing I want to add to it, and also from my clinical experience in working with teenagers and helping families prepare for the transition to adult services, is the notion of time. You need real time. If you think of something like capacity building, so allowing youth to take charge of their own health, that is something that needs to be practiced. So as an example, I help youth to make their own appointments. In the beginning, they are very confused because I give the slip for making an appointment, not to their parents anymore, but to the young person, and they don't know what to do with it. But after a few times, you see that it becomes part of their usual activity. And the same is with other similar things like speaking up or asking questions or answering questions of a healthcare provider. That's very scary. So you need to, first of all, I think you have to invest in the relationship with anyone you work with, because it's all built on trust. Secondly, you have to create the opportunity, and I think that's I see it as my responsibility as a healthcare provider. And then to let it be a positive experience, because we know that over time you have better outcomes in life if you have had positive experiences. Basically, it's an amplifier effect. And the same as also for negative experiences, that has a huge detrimental effect in the long term. So a huge responsibility here, and I can refer to a knowledge synthesis we did for the Ministry for Children and Youth Services that we have published on, and I'm happy to share that. Anyone interested around the trajectories of youth with disabilities across disabilities, and that whole notion of positive experiences.
Great. We're coming to the end of our time here, and I want to thank Peter, Jan Willem, Maria, Julie, Andrea, and Gail for all being a great panel today. Does anybody have any other final thoughts or words before we wrap up today?
This is Peter, and I want to make a point that Jan Willem and I learned a long time ago that one of the best resources is clever friends. Smart graduate students, and this session was organized to a very, very considerable extent and incredibly well by Andrea, whose PhD work is related to all of what we've been talking about. So I think it should be recognized that we wrote the paper a long time ago, and other people have been doing good things with it since.
It's Gail here. I think this is a quote from you, Peter. At least it's in my notes from a couple of years ago. The best way to predict your future is to help create it.
I don't know if I said that, but I'll accept the compliment. Thank you, Gail, very much.
All righty. So I just want to thank everybody again, and thank everybody for showing up today, all of our attendees. And a reminder that the presentation is recorded, and it will be up on our Knowledge Exchange Network in a couple of days from now. So hopefully we'll see you again. We have webinars every Wednesday, so hopefully you'll be back for our next one. Thanks very much.
Thank you all. Thank you.